Good morning. I'm Julio Saenz, along with Mauricio Riveras. Today we'll meet Tricia Marsherall, who launched her own successful business helping nonprofits and corporations with fundraising and events.
We hope you will be inspired.
Celebrating leaders in Rochester's unique and vibrant business community. We'll meet entrepreneurs whose passion and perseverance have helped push through life's challenges. Join us as we share their stories and journeys to success. It's time to be inspired.
Tricia, thank you very much for being in Be Inspired, a show that we developed to inspire our community here in Rochester, interview interesting people like you. So let's start learning who is Tricia.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am the founder and owner of Marsherall Partners. It's a nonprofit consulting firm based here in Rochester. I came to Rochester for college and, like many others, never left. I guess if we're going deep, my personal mission is to really be a force for good, and that's really where my company was born out of. Whether that's in my family or friendships, in my work or in my community, it's really important to me to make a positive impact on the world around me.
Fantastic. And so what are some of the services that your company offers?
So my company focuses on 4 key areas. I specialize in working with nonprofit organizations on CRM management and outsourced gift processing. So I manage database conversions, perform assessments for my clients to determine their workflow and streamline it within their databases. I perform data analytics to help organizations really take a data-driven approach to their strategy development. I also specialize in fundraising operations, so taking a look at their processes, recommending improvements on them, taking a look really at the bottom line. At the end of the day, my goal is to help my clients see improved ROI on the decisions that they're making from a fundraising perspective. I also specialize in fundraising events, and as you can imagine with COVID, that has drastically shifted. So prior to COVID, it was traditionally in-person events, fundraising events, and as you can imagine, in March last year, my business really pivoted on a dime. And so I had 8 events that were scheduled between spring and in 2020 that had to shift rapidly. So I am now an expert in virtual fundraising events as well. And then the 4th cornerstone of my firm is corporate philanthropic strategies. So helping corporations align their values with their corporate giving strategies to really assess and communicate the impact of their philanthropic efforts.
Wow, that's very impressive and very holistic. Clearly, you have a holistic approach to help your clients not to look one aspect, just the fundraising, but look at the entire organization, systematically analyze different components and try to basically get all together with one goal, which is fantastic. Congratulations. Now, Rochester is a very giving community and has been historically like that. You touch base on COVID, and what's the impact? Do you see that people are continue to give, or these ways are the new ways that people are giving are allowing at least to stabilize? What's your take? What's your assessment?
It's really been impacted in a number of different ways. So when COVID first hit, we saw our community mobilize like no other. It was really inspiring to see the foundations like the United Way, like ESL and the Rochester Area Community Foundation. They came together to make a bigger impact, to leverage their funding, to be able to immediately respond to the needs of the organization. So they deployed millions of dollars into our community to try to assist and respond to the needs, which was really inspiring to see. From the individual and corporate philanthropic lens, I'd say that we've had many people stepping up to give as well. It's truly been inspiring to watch. I think we're seeing a lot of donors within our community who have the capacity to give major gifts, who have definitely stepped up over the last year to really make an impact. And we've also seen people who have the ability to be able to contribute. A lot of those smaller donation amounts, those smaller amounts are coming in increased increments and increased frequency. So I think we're seeing a lot of people giving more frequently. It may be smaller amounts if they have been impacted financially by COVID, but I think we're still really seeing the trends of people responding in our community. And from the event perspective, the organizations that I'm working with are doing well in terms of shifting their focus and being able to respond and put together virtual events. And many of the nonprofits that I'm working with are actually seeing higher net profits, although the gross profits are decreased. The expenses aren't there as kind of proportionally with the virtual events as they are with an in-person event.
Fantastic. And it's fascinating, and it's an amazing time to be in the business given all these changes. What inspired you originally to decide that you wanted to make a business of this and help all these different organizations?
So the business answer is I started working out in the nonprofit sector straight out of college, and I absolutely loved working with mission-driven organizations. I went back to school for my MBA and also quickly realized that I loved business development. And so I wanted to marry the two of being able to be in business for myself and grow something that was my own, while also being able to work with the organizations who are doing really incredible things in our community. And I think from the personal side of that, my business was really born out of my drive to want to make a difference in our community. So I wanted to build something that was mine, that I could be proud of, and that I could wake up every day loving what I do.
So strategies of giving and strategies to motivate people to give. I saw a lot of variety of things. People do actions and they do events and they do one another things. And unfortunately, sometimes, we are bombarded with requests of support and help. And what would be the most important recommendation that you can give to a not-for-profit to identify what's the most creative way to do a fundraising?
I think whatever the initiative is, it's always about bringing it back to the mission, right? Because it's about the people. It's about the impact that the donors are able to make with their gift. And I think getting really clear on being able to communicate that and communicate it effectively. Nonprofits are being called to do a lot with less resources, with fewer resources, and donors who, whether they're business owners or corporations or individual donors, are also having to try to decide where to best invest their donation. And I think the invest is really the key operating word there, because donors want to know that they are investing in an organization that they're going to be able to see an immediate impact with their gift. And I think organizations have to then leverage their data to be able to show the story. It's great to be able to tell those anecdotal, the stories that really pull on your heartstrings, but you have to couple that with the data to be able to demonstrate the impact of the gift. And I think when organizations can marry the two, then the fundraising, whether it's an annual appeal, whether it's a capital campaign, or whether it's an event, I think as long as it's clear, then the efforts will be much more likely to be successful.
Fantastic. As Mauricio mentioned earlier, I just love how holistic your approach is to it. It's just so inclusive of, I think, all the factors that you need to make these things successful. And I wanted to ask you, when you're dealing with, I guess, old school ways of fundraising, like events and things, and then the social media campaigns, how do you see all that changing over time? I mean, obviously COVID has made us change in some ways quicker than maybe we thought, but what do you see the future of fundraising being?
I think organizations in our community, I think there's going to be a few different things happening. So I think we're going to see many nonprofits merging or collaborations. I think we're also seeing grant funders wanting to see more collaborations with nonprofit organizations so that they're able to leverage the investment that foundations and corporations are making in the nonprofit sector within our community. I think long term, there's going to be a huge generational transfer of wealth, the largest of its kind, happening within our nation as the baby boomers are transferring their wealth to the younger generations, whether that's going to be their children, their grandchildren, or nonprofits. So I think nonprofits who do not already have a planned giving strategy in place are really going to need to invest in that. And then I think from the technology perspective, it's changing rapidly. We've already seen that happening with COVID. And I think the virtual events may be here to stay for a little while longer. I think we may start to see hybrid events where some people are going to return when it's safe to do so again to an in-person setting. But I think that we're still going to see virtual events around for a while longer. I think we have been required to track our data more. So I mentioned one of the services that I offer is CRM management and really looking at the donor data. I think nonprofits are really going to need to leverage that information now more than ever. Perform those analytics, understand who they're approaching, how they're approaching, and why.
Well, thank you, Tricia. We'll be back with more after these messages. When you have staff and employees now and everything, at what point did you decide, hey, this is too much for just me to handle?
I probably waited a little bit too long for that. That is a tough one. And I think when you make your first hire, so I have a lot of mentors and I have other entrepreneurs that I connect with and speak with. And I think that is certainly a difficult decision to make, because it's one thing for me to be up and working all hours of the night to deliver for a client. It's another thing to be responsible for someone's livelihood and to be an employer. And there's a lot that goes into making the decision to be an employer. But I think for me, I got to the point where it was either I needed to stop taking on more clients because I just didn't have enough. I had no more hours to give, or I needed to take that leap of faith and invest in myself and my firm and hire somebody. And it's scary to lean into that fear and to making that decision. But ultimately, I wouldn't have been happy not taking on additional clients. I would not have been happy having to stunt my growth. And for me, then once I framed it in that perspective, the answer was clear. I needed to hire, I needed to staff, I needed a team to work with me and support me.
Excellent. And that's so important and so valuable, because you are serving organizations like any other, driving missions, and very important missions that can affect the community, can impact our society. How do you see Rochester, and what's the perspective in the future? And I know you don't have a magic ball, but what do you see in the future or in our not-for-profit organizations?
For Rochester and probably the nonprofit world in general, but I think what you're going to see happening in the industry is more nonprofits collaborating, perhaps merging together to make sure that their resources are optimized. I think we're going to see more emphasis on endowment development to create sustainable infrastructure, because I think we're seeing a huge shift in funding in terms of government grants and funding, state funding. And I think having service lines that can earn revenue for organizations as well, for organizations that it makes sense with, I think we'll start to see that trend as well.
You mentioned mentors. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your mentors? I know for me, they didn't have to, when I started some of my businesses, they didn't need to even be in my field. It was just someone to bounce ideas off of. Can you tell us about your mentors?
Yeah, I was really fortunate early on in my career. My very first job, I started out and I actually had the opportunity to report to the president and CEO of the cancer center that I was working at the time. And it was really an incredible experience to have a leader who allowed you and afforded you the opportunity to grow to try and take on new projects within your career, and to have somebody to kind of guide and lead in a way that I knew that I wanted to be able to do. I also do a lot of work with a group called Entrepreneurs Organization of Western New York locally. And it's a group of entrepreneurs, and they have been just an invaluable asset for me to be able to call and say, hey, can I take 15 minutes and just pick your brain? And it's these exact types of questions. How did you know that it was time to hire the next person? How did you know when it was time to bring in an integrator into your business? How these questions that it's hard to figure out. And so when you don't know the answers, I think it's really important to just reach out and have somebody that you can trust and have those conversations with.
Tricia, that's very important and so valuable. And I love the approach that you have, recognizing your mentors and people who have impacted your life and your career. What would be your message to people right now that are in depression, that they are out there watching right now the show and they don't know what they will do after COVID? You are an entrepreneur. You figure it out. You built an organization, and even you recreate yourself during the COVID. You start now doing online events, and you need to keep going. What would be your message to people who are struggling right now as an injection of inspiration?
For me, my personal mantra is grace and grit. And I think it's what anchors me. It's what I remind myself. And what I mean by grace and grit, it's have the grace to stay poised, to stay humble, to stay kind, and the grit to have the courage, the resolve, and the determination to get it done, whatever it is. And that's really what drives me. It's having that courage to take the risk, to invest in yourself, and to just go for it.
Excellent. Now, how do you stay? I mean, you seem so well informed on all the trends and everything in the industry. How do you stay informed on everything that's changing in your business, in your industry?
So for me, it's really important to pay attention to the data. So I am constantly looking at the data within my clients' donor databases, and that really gives me real-time information about the current trends within the organization. But also, because I work with so many nonprofit organizations, I can start to see trends at least locally. I also serve on the board for the Association of Fundraising Professionals, so I make sure to stay involved within my industry. That networking and those business relationships are really important to continue to grow.
That's awful. That's awesome, because what creates is synergies. Right now, let me ask you this question: is synergies between public sector, not-for-profit organizations, and private sector. How do you see that? Because I think sometimes I see a lot of silos. So you have the private organizations no articulating too much with the public sector, and no articulation with the not-for-profit organizations. How we break those silos?
So I had mentioned one of the service lines within my firm is working with corporations on their philanthropic giving strategies. And I think it's really important. So just as nonprofits must be very intentional about their operations, their fundraising, and how they are soliciting, whether it's individuals or organizations, I think that corporations have a responsibility to also strategize with their philanthropic approach. And so understanding what types of organizations align with your company's mission and vision and values and company culture, and understanding that the impact of their philanthropic giving. And I think it's really important for organizations and individual donors to do the research on the nonprofits that they're working with and that they're going to be investing in, because it is an investment, and it's an investment not only in the nonprofit organization, but it's an investment ultimately in our community. And that's really key to me. I think the other piece of it that's really important is it's wonderful to give money, but it's also really important to volunteer time. And I think organizations that are really connected with the nonprofit sector also have programs where their employees can volunteer, or they make that a priority for their firm to make sure that their employees are involved in the nonprofit sector.
Once again, just such a holistic approach to all of it. I absolutely love it. Now, just we're almost out of time, but if you were to, this is one of our traditional questions, but I'm very interested in hearing your answer on this. If you were on the cover of Time magazine, what would the headline say?
Grace and grit.
Again, very systematic, holistic, powerful approach. Tricia, really thank you very much. Thank you for what you are doing in this community. Your efforts multiply, your efforts are conducted to help others, and this is wonderful. People like you, entrepreneurs who are taking the risk, who are investing in this beautiful place, Rochester, New York. Thank you for doing that, and I'm sure that we will have you in the future to learn more about the progress of your organization and the great things that you are doing for this community. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up next week on Be Inspired, we'll meet John Laurie, who left Rochester but came back to his hometown to start Cause and Effect Strategy, a company specializing in business intelligence.
To watch today's episode and the complete interviews of our guests, go to rochesterfirst.com/beinspired. For more great talk with Rochester's entrepreneurs, listen to Bodette 97.1, Saturdays at 9 a.m. For Mauricio Riveros, I'm Julio Saenz. We'll see you next week on Be Inspired.